Tensions between the United States and Iran have persisted for decades, shaped by disputes over Iran's nuclear program, regional influence, proxy networks, and economic sanctions. While Washington often emphasizes diplomacy and deterrence, the military option continues to surface in political and strategic debates. Yet any attempt to invade Iran would be far more complex, costly, and risky than past US interventions in the Middle East. Iran's geography, population, military capabilities, and regional alliances make a simple or purely air-based operation unrealistic. Although airstrikes remain the most popular and politically palatable option, they would be insufficient on their own. A comprehensive campaign would almost certainly require coordinated air, naval, and ground operations supported by US bases in neighboring countries. First option is air campaign. The most frequently discussed scenario for a US attack on Iran involves a large-scale air campaign. This approach reflects the American preference for minimizing troop casualties while relying on technological superiority as seen in Iraq, Libya, and Syria. Key targets would include Iran's nuclear facilities in Natanz, Fordo, and Arak, missile production sites, air defense systems, command and control centers, and bases of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The US could deploy stealth bombers such as the B-2, long-range bombers like the B-52, cruise missiles launched from submarines, armed drones, and cyber operations to cripple Iranian infrastructure. The advantages of this approach are clear. It allows Washington to strike quickly, limit American casualties, and demonstrate military dominance. However, air power alone has serious limitations. First, many of Iran's nuclear facilities are deeply buried and heavily fortified. Fordo, for example, is built inside a mountain, making it extremely difficult to destroy with conventional airstrikes. Second, air attacks can weaken military infrastructure, but they cannot remove the political leadership or ensure regime change. Third, Iran possesses significant retaliation capabilities, including ballistic missiles, drones, cyber weapons, and proxy forces across the region. US bases, Israel, Gulf states, and shipping routes would likely face immediate counterattacks. In short, air power could degrade Iran's capabilities, but it would not be decisive on its own. Second option is naval operations. Any military confrontation with Iran would inevitably involve naval power. The US Navy maintains a strong presence in the Persian Gulf, the Arabian Sea, and the Indian Ocean through aircraft carrier strike groups, destroyers, submarines, and amphibious forces. Iran's most strategic maritime leverage point is the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow choke point through which roughly one-third of the world's seaborne oil passes. Iran has repeatedly threatened to close the strait in the event of war by using naval mines, fast attack boats, anti-ship missiles, and drone swarms. A US naval campaign would likely focus on destroying Iran's coastal missile batteries and naval bases, keeping the Strait of Hormuz open, protecting commercial shipping and energy flows, and supporting air and ground operations. However, Iran's naval doctrine emphasizes asymmetric warfare rather than conventional fleet battles. Small, fast, and hard-to-detect units could disrupt US operations and create economic shockwaves without engaging in direct confrontation. Even limited attacks on oil tankers or port infrastructure could destabilize global markets. Thus, while naval superiority is essential, it cannot achieve strategic victory alone. Third option is ground invasion. If the objective were not merely to punish Iran but to occupy territory, dismantle the regime, or enforce long-term political change, a ground invasion would be unavoidable. Iran's geography presents severe challenges: vast deserts, rugged mountain ranges, dense urban centers, and complex transportation networks. With a population of nearly 90 million and a strong sense of nationalism, the country could sustain long-term resistance to foreign occupation. Unlike Iraq in 2003, this country has a larger military, more cohesive national identity, and stronger internal security forces. The army, Basij militias, and intelligence services are deeply embedded in society and capable of mobilizing both conventional and irregular forces. Possible invasion routes include neighboring destinations. They can attack from Iraq, The US still maintains military infrastructure in Iraq, and Iran's western border could serve as a corridor for ground forces. However, Iranian-aligned militias in Iraq would likely attack supply lines, making this route extremely dangerous. They can attack from the Gulf states. Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, and the UAE host major US bases and logistics hubs. Southern Iran could be targeted via amphibious landings and armored advances supported by air and naval power. The main risk of a ground invasion is a prolonged occupation. Urban warfare, insurgency, and nationalist resistance could trap US forces in a costly and politically damaging conflict similar to or worse than Iraq and Afghanistan. America's military footprint across the Middle East is central to any scenario. Key installations include Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the US Fifth Fleet in Bahrain, bases in Kuwait and the UAE, facilities in Saudi Arabia, and remaining infrastructure in Iraq. These bases provide launch platforms for airstrikes, logistics for ground forces, naval coordination, intelligence operations, and regional command control. However, they also represent vulnerabilities. Iran possesses short and medium-range missiles capable of targeting these installations. Drone and cyber attacks could disrupt operations, while proxy groups in Iraq, Lebanon, and Yemen could open multiple fronts simultaneously. A war with Iran would therefore not remain confined to Iranian territory. It would likely engulf the wider Middle East. Beyond conventional military action, the US could intensify hybrid warfare strategies. These include cyber attacks on infrastructure, economic pressure through sanctions, psychological operations, support for opposition groups, diplomatic isolation. The goal would be to weaken the Iranian state from within, create internal pressure, and reduce the need for large-scale occupation. However, Iran's security apparatus has proven resilient, and past attempts to destabilize the regime have produced limited results. Hybrid tools can complement military action, but they cannot replace it. The central strategic illusion in many discussions about Iran is the belief that airstrikes alone could achieve decisive results. While air power can destroy infrastructure, it cannot control territory, reshape political systems, or eliminate deeply rooted institutions. Iran's leadership, military doctrine, and social structure are designed to absorb external pressure and convert it into internal mobilization. A purely aerial campaign might even strengthen nationalist sentiment and legitimize the regime domestically. Real regime change or occupation would require ground forces. Securing sea lanes would require naval dominance. Regional stability would demand long-term political management. Each of these elements carries massive costs. Even if the United States could militarily defeat Iran, the political consequences would be severe. There will be regional instability, disruption of global energy markets, strengthening of anti-American alliances, rise of asymmetric warfare, long-term occupation costs, and domestic political backlash in the United States. Iran is not Iraq or Libya. It is larger, more complex, and more deeply integrated into regional power structures. A US invasion of Iran would not be a quick or simple operation. While airstrikes remain the most popular and politically convenient option, they are far from sufficient. A realistic strategy would require coordinated air, naval, and ground operations supported by US bases across the Middle East. Yet even such a comprehensive campaign would face enormous military, political, and economic risks. Iran's retaliation capabilities, asymmetric warfare doctrine, and national cohesion would make any occupation costly and uncertain. For these reasons, while military action against Iran is technically feasible, it remains strategically dangerous and politically controversial. Air power alone may look appealing, but only a full-spectrum campaign could achieve lasting results, and even then, at an extremely high price. Beyond the military and strategic dimensions, any US invasion of Iran would also carry profound ideological and symbolic consequences. Iran has long framed itself as a defender of sovereignty against Western intervention, and a direct attack by the United States would likely reinforce this narrative across the Islamic world.